Welcome, everyone. One more time, just want to ask you now to close your eyes and let's take some deep breaths, breathing at your own pace. And on every exhale, I invite you to just let go, release whatever else you might have been thinking about or doing before coming to class. And on the inhale, coming into your center, whatever your center might mean. Could be your third eye, your heart, your belly. And invite us all to really feel our connection to the earth. Feel our connection to that grounded place. I love to imagine Mother Earth holding us at all times. We're always being held by our true mother. And what is your relationship to our planet? This was Earth Week, Earth Day week. What's your relationship to Mother Earth? When do you feel most connected to this planet that gives us life? Drawing upon that connection is so important. Feeling held, feeling connected. Especially when we are dealing with difficult situations, difficult people. Knowing I am safe, I am held, and having it as an experiential knowing, not a philosophical thought. And concluding just this part of the meditation, giving thanks to the earth, giving thanks to Gaia for these body temples that we get to be in, for the food we eat, the water we drink, the air that we breathe. Thank you, Mother Earth. Thank you. And invite us now to shift our attention up, up, up to what has 1,000 names. God, life, the universe, higher self, higher power, source. Whatever you call it. How do you imagine it? And once again, what's your connection to what I'm just going to call Father Sky Creator? You can use your own title for it. When do you feel connected to your own higher power, higher self, to God? What does that feel like? What does that look like? What's your practice? Because once again, learning how to have some form of faith, it doesn't need to be religious. Faith can be a practice of being in nature. Faith can be a practice of playing a musical instrument. Or it can be meditation or yoga or a religious path. We don't promote any specific one, but we encourage people to have a practice that helps them to feel connected to that which is greater than themselves. So just dropping into that. And for the final step today, I invite us to imagine that all of life is a sacred mirror helping us to remember love, how to love ourselves, and how to love each other. And even the people in our life that are difficult, learning how to set clear boundaries with compassion, absolutely to protect ourselves from being safe, but learning how to set boundaries, not walls, learning how to see the divinity in others, even when it's so difficult. This is what we're working on in Relationship Essentials. And today we're going to learn specific tools of how to do that. And so I invite you to imagine someone in your life that's important to you, either a family member, a close friend, a lover, someone you work with, or someone you live with, but someone that's in your life and isn't just going to be leaving necessarily, someone that you need to maintain relationship with. Ideally, someone you want to maintain relationship with, but someone that's difficult for you. Pick one specific challenging relationship. And we're going to be referencing that work relationship for a while today. When you've decided which relationship you're going to be working with, I invite you to open your eyes, come back into the room. From Andy, Greg, Anupama, and Mimi, please turn on your cameras. We'd love to see you.
I I would do it, but I'm moving around and I don't want to be distracting to others.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Yeah,
Thanks for
you're
letting us
welcome.
know that. Yeah. I'm not going to call on anyone, but I'm going to ask a few questions by raise of hands just to get connected. And a reminder, you may want to go up to gallery view. Again, if you're on your phone, if you swipe left or right, I think if you swipe left, you can go back and forth between gallery view. Now on the phone, you can only see 4 people at a time. Of course, on our laptop, we can see everybody. So by raise of hands only, who was able to really feel a connection to the earth, to Mother Earth during that part of the meditation? Okay, wonderful. And if you can't, it's okay. It's just gives me a chance to see how kind of these meditations work for people. Who is able to feel a connection to source, higher self, something greater than themselves? Okay, beautiful. And who is able to think of um, a specific person to work with? Okay. Did anybody not come up with a specific person to work with? Okay. So, Mark, you're muted. You're muted, Mark. Mark, you're muted.
I was disconnected. I just came back, so I don't know what you were asking.
Oh, to pick one person in your life that you have an ongoing relationship with that's challenging. Okay. And we're going to kind of work with that for a little bit. All right. So here's the very first and most important step. To differentiate between the being and the behavior. It's very, very important to differentiate between the being and the behavior. You see, our problem, our issue when we are challenged by somebody, it's their behavior or a choice they've made, or perhaps a habit that they have, which bothers us. And that's legitimate. And we're going to talk about why it bothers us. But where it escalates and can become toxic is when we make it about the being, when we turn them into an enemy image. He's such a jerk. What a bitch. he's an asshole, or even, I'm an idiot, I'm a jerk. When we turn someone into an enemy image, it's an act of violence, and it destroys relationship. I was working with a couple yesterday, and we had this beautiful breakthrough. They really love each other. It's a lesbian couple, and they adore each other. But when they get into arguments, they throw out words. And one of the things was, you're a hypocrite. And just when I taught them this little thing about never label your beloved, never label anybody, but let's start with just don't label your beloved. You can say, wow, I'm confused. I'm experiencing that as hypocritical. But you're a hypocrite. Now that person's going to go totally into a little toy, reptile brain, and defend themselves, right? And so it's so important to differentiate between the choice they've made, the behavior they have, as opposed to who they are as a being, and learning to see all beings as divinity. Really practicing seeing all beings as God or life fully experiencing itself, as Donald Trump, as Scott Catamas, as Cassandra Ross, as Anuprabha. It's all, however you want to call it, life, God, experiencing itself fully as this person. Now, it doesn't mean you have to condone or even like that person. And you don't have to condone or like their habits, their choices, or their behaviors. But seeing the divinity in all is a universal spiritual practice. Non-denominational, but it's a universal spiritual practice. And it's at the foundation of Love Coach Academy. And it's at the foundation of healthy relationships. I mean, think about it. How do you feel when someone labels you? She's a bitch. She's a whatever it is. He's a jerk. He's an asshole. He's an addict. He's a drunk. Right? Those words put us into prison of the other person's mind. And none of us want to be in prison, especially of somebody else's mind. And I want to acknowledge that probably most of the people watching this still sometimes do that. Sometimes create an enemy image like that. That's okay. Starting today, you're going to have an awareness and make a commitment to not doing that. And it will change your life and it will change your relationships. I promise you. A couple more thoughts about this and then we'll open it up to discussion. First off, I want to acknowledge Marshall Rosenberg, my mentor, who helped me to really understand about enemy images. And an analogy he used was that when soldiers go to war, they have to dehumanize the enemy in order to kill them. In order to kill a human being, you have to dehumanize them. So my grandfather went to Europe not to kill Hans, Peter, or Jürgen, but to kill the dirty Nazis. Our current soldiers, when they're dropping bombs, when they're guiding these drones to drop bombs, they aren't told, okay, now inside that house is going to be Muli and Abdul and Maisuli and their wife and children. No, inside that house are the evil terrorists. It's an enemy image. We do that every time we label someone, whether it's labeling someone we don't know like Trump, whether it's labeling a neighbor, whether it's labeling a family member, or even labeling ourselves. We're creating an enemy image. And so the absolute most important first step is to make a commitment not to do that. There are other steps, which we'll get to, but I'm going to take the spotlight off myself for a moment, and I'd love to open it up to just, anybody wants to raise their hand, any thoughts, reflections, anything that comes up for people. Mimi and then Miriam, and you can just unmute yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. The first things that come to mind are the curiosity. Like that's my first shift towards moving out of enemy state into recognizing that we're all here learning and growing. And that helps me go into empathy from curiosity. So the two that have actually come up for me the most and that I'm practicing blessings around are going in and understanding the other points of view in politics and where they're coming from, that deep fear space where they're coming from. And then the second is speaking up when I'm hearing women talk about all men are assholes or all men are jerks, and really speaking into, wow, it sounds like you've had some experiences there. I'd like to hear about that to start disassembling that all men are. So those are the two that I'm speaking to currently.
Beautiful. Everybody, let's twinkle Mimi. Cassandra, in this class, we twinkle people. That's our way of saying thank you and appreciating them. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's absolutely accurate. And one of the things I was going to talk about. So thank you, Mimi. Miriam, what comes up for you?
Yeah. So when you asked about different people who brought up, these feelings, I actually thought of my husband, and we actually have a good relationship. But lately, I think where we've been, and actually, I'll say my mother-in-law as well, is kind of tied into the same topic. So I think where we disagree is that, or not disagree, but where a big sticking point is, he's in my eyes, and I'm going to say in my eyes, he's gotten into like some of these conspiracy theories. In his eyes, he's seeing the truth, but I think he believes that I'm like kind of brainwashed, and I don't see the full truth. And so for me, that's a sticking point because I believe we're entitled to our own beliefs, but then I get defensive sometimes. And then I say, well, and then, and I'll say this, and I'm totally not, but he's actually starting to fall in love with Donald Trump. And that's created some issues for me. So then I start to defer, then I start to actually, project feelings onto Donald Trump. I mean, actually he bothered me before, but now he bothers me more than ever. And my mother-in-law is a Donald Trump fan. So she lived with us for about a year when she was having financial struggles. It felt like a year. Probably it was actually only 8 months. And some of the things that she would say when this was during the election were very, because my mother-in-law's, is white. I mean, that's, but she had some racialized views, and she would see me as the exception. And then she would tell me to vote for Donald Trump. He's good for the blacks, and it kind of bothered me. And, so I think that's what I want to work on, is having empathy. When you said not labeling, I think that's important. It's just really having compassion, but also standing true to my own boundaries. Like I'm entitled to my opinion, and I don't have to let other people project onto me their belief systems.
Absolutely. So let me address a couple of the things there. Thank you, Miriam. Let's all twinkle Miriam.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's an example that, certainly when somebody has a radically different belief system and they're locked into that this is the truth, and that's really hard. And just recognize that anytime any of us believe this is the truth, we've stepped into being self-righteous. And self-righteousness is very dangerous. Most people that go to war are in a self-righteous mindset because, again, it takes being self-righteous to go to war and kill people. And so what we want to do, a couple just quick tips, and then I'm going to kind of come back to kind of the next steps, but a couple of quick trips there. What Miriam said, what Mimi said, be curious. Be curious. Why does somebody love Donald Trump? Why does somebody believe whatever conspiracy theory there is? I mean, right now, with what's going on with Corona, there are so many conflicting theories out there on the internet, right? Bill and Melinda Gates are the devil, and they're creating a vaccine that's going to, put microchips into all of us. Bill and Melinda Gates have the vaccine that's going to save us. It's a biological weapon that's been created to enslave humanity. It's 5G. No, it's fifth dimension coming into our planet. I mean, those are just some of them, right? None of us know what the truth is. None of us know what the truth is. But we may have strong beliefs. Now, here's a really important key. Don't argue about the beliefs. Do what Mimi suggested. Be curious. What is it about Donald Trump that you so respect? Why is it you believe that Donald Trump is good for black people? Ask questions. And try and see which values or universal human needs are alive for that person to cause them to believe that. And don't allow yourself to fall into arguing with them about it. Like you just said, Miriam, everybody has a right to their belief. You don't have to like it. You certainly don't have to accept it. But remember, emotional intelligence, which we're cultivating in this class, is learning how to understand another person even when we don't agree with them. Okay? That's compassion. Learning to understand another person even if we don't agree with what they believe. That's raising our bar. That's raising our notch. And later today, we're going to talk about how to set boundaries with compassion, because sometimes we have to do that. Okay? Remember that everything we do as human beings is driven by kind of a set of what we call universal human needs, also known as universal human values. And this is kind of like the next step in kind of looking at what we're learning today. I'm actually going to pull it up on my screen share here. There we go. So this list, which you're going to see in a moment, I'm just making it a proper size so everyone can see it better. Oh, it's still too big. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. So this is a really important part of learning how to manage our relationship to difficult behavior. And again, can everybody see the list? And it's harder on a phone, but can everybody see the list? Mimi, give me a thumbs up. Okay. So this list is, and I'll post it in our group threads. Everybody should have this list printed out. And really, for those of you that are love coaches, and about half the people in this, or actually more than half, I think, of the people in this class are part of my mentorship program, Learning to be Love Coaches. You got to memorize these words. Memorize them. At the very least, start by memorizing what's in bold, because those are the categories. But this is so critical to how we make the shift. So, think about that person who bothers you. And pick a behavior or a choice or something they do that bothers you. Okay? Looking at this list, which of these words are driving their behavior? And you're not going to go into judging it. You're not going to choose whether or not you like Donald Trump. You're just looking at, okay, that person who believes that Donald Trump is a great guy and a great leader, which values, which of these words might be met in that person's thinking? All right. And for anybody, like maybe Cassandra, I don't know how easy it is to read. I'll read at least some of the big categories. The categories are, and I'm going to read some of the key words. By the way, the primary needs, there's 6 primary needs that we as human beings have, and almost everything we do is usually driven by one of these, especially in relationship. Connection, safety, respect, appreciation, to be seen clearly, and to be understood. In relationships, those are the big 6. In life, we need security and sustenance, food, safety, rest, shelter. We need security, peace, stability, trust. We need freedom. This next category is for you inner teenager, or anybody who has teenagers. Autonomy, freedom of choice, independence, self-responsibility, power, space. We all need leisure, relaxation. We need to laugh, joy, play, pleasure, rejuvenation. We need connection, and that shows up as affection, companionship, harmony, love, intimacy, sexual expression, tenderness, support, warmth. We need to matter, acceptance, care, compassion, consideration, empathy, kindness, respect, to be heard, to be seen, to be known, to be understood, to be trusted, to understand others. We need community, belonging, communication. We need meaning of life, a sense of self, authenticity, creativity, dignity, growth, healing, honesty, integrity, all the self-acceptance, self-care, self-connections. We need understanding, awareness, clarity, discovery, making sense of life. We need meaning. That can include challenge, consciousness, contribution, creativity, effectiveness. And we need transcendence, which includes beauty, celebration of life, faith, hope, inspiration, mourning, internal peace, and presence. And I named all these words because we do have a couple of people that are sight impaired with us. And so as I went through that, or for those of you that looked at the list, thinking about the person who challenges you, I'd like you to put into the chat box, and for the people that are like Candace and Greg, who don't have access to the chat box, I'm going to ask you to speak. Which of these universal human needs, which of these universal human values might be what's driving the behavior or the choice that the person who bothers you is making? Okay. Candace, which words?
Value, connection, respect. I don't know what word would apply to being heard and seen. Understanding?
So being heard, being seen clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Big ones.
Greg, did certain words come to mind as you heard me sharing the words? I'm unmuting you. There you go.
Yeah. I think one of the important ones for the friend of mine that I'm having issues with is being of value, being of assistance. Yeah.
So they're trying to maybe show care, maybe trying to contribute.
Yeah, and they're super trying to be super helpful. Yeah.
So
and then my point is they do it their way.
right. Or is it also that you experience it as overly caretaking?
Not overly caretaking, but just they do it the way they want to do it and not actually find out if I want something or how I might want it done. And they'll do it in a way that isn't supportive to me.
Okay, so what Greg is, thank you, Greg. So in the
Yeah.
Soul Twinkle, Candace and Greg, we're twinkling, you guys. Yes, you may say something, Candace.
Oh, I'm not muted?
No.
Okay. Greg, I was just curious because I wonder if there's a similarity with what we're talking about, because as a visually impaired person, I experience the regular thing of people wanting to care take versus care give, which shows up in a multitude of ways, but definitely like, hey, I see you're trying to meet my need, but that's not really my need and I didn't ask for help kind of thing.
A little bit, but mostly just he's super helpful with everybody, and maybe it is the type of thing of it differs. Like, yeah, we could certainly talk about that.
We'll go there.
Thank you, Greg and Candace. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Um, Anybody else want to share just which of the universal human needs and values you're imagining the other person is driving the other person's behavior? Anybody else want to share it verbally? Anaprabha.
And I just want to say a little bit just about the last point about the dehumanizing aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I was in middle school and the Vietnam War was going on, and I remember seeing a newspaper with headlines saying gooks, 300 gooks were killed. And I'm like, gooks? What's a gook, right? And that has stuck with me to this day, that headline. So the dehumanizing aspect.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the words for me are security, stability, and trust.
Yeah. So who noticed, I'm not going to call in, thank you, Anaprabha. I'm not going to call on anybody, but who noticed that as you imagined which of these words were driving the other person's behavior, who had a little bit of extra insight, understanding, or compassion of that person? Beautiful. And did anybody hit that? I have no idea what was driving them. Anybody hit that place? Cassandra, a little bit. It happens sometimes. Sometimes it's like their behavior is so hard for us to fathom that it's hard to come up with the universal human needs or values that it might be. And that's understandable. But that's where then we have to dig deeper, really look at the list, really try and imagine, okay, in their world, their way of seeing things, which of these words might be driving them? And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to grow in our consciousness, in our awareness. And it makes us a more well-rounded human being, a more compassionate human being, and certainly for those of you coaching, a better coach. Okay, now we're going to get to the next step, which I'm going to bring that list up again. And this time, you're bothered by this person's choice or behavior. Well, which of your needs were not being met by their choice? In other words, whatever it was they did, their choice, their behavior, which of your words, which of these universal human needs and values were not being met or were challenged by that? Your need for safety, being understood, connection, respect, consideration, independence, dignity, inclusion. These are all some of the common ones that are needs that aren't met when somebody has a behavior that bothers us. And again, I invite you to put into the chat box which of the words, which of your needs, which of your values were either not being met or being challenged by their behavior, by their choices. Sometimes for those of you looking at the list, you'll see words that you haven't thought about for a while, like, wow. When was the last time you thought about your need for creativity, making sense of life, stimulation, mattering to yourself? So again, Candace, I'll call on you since which of your needs were threatened or not being met?
Independence, respect, consideration, and I'm wondering where this would fall. My need to know what the other person really needs and for them to share that with me clearly so that I can meet their need as well, you know? I don't know what
Yes.
you would call that.
That would be your need for understanding, the need to understand them and to be understood. So it's the need for understanding.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. That's it. That's the one. Thanks, Candace.
Give it to me, Mama.
Greg, do you want to share verbally?
Yeah. The one word that really was, and now that I think about it, I don't know, but the word just kept sticking in my mind when you were saying it was dignity, or other people were saying dignity.
Yeah.
But definitely feeling independence is a big one. You know, I want to be independent and included, which, you know, sometimes,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I just really appreciating the vulnerability of that, right? I want to be included and I want to be independent. And yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's Twinkle, Candace, and Greg. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share out loud what came up for you? Daniel, and then Deborah.
Yeah, I was noticing that one of the things I chose was self-acceptance. Like I had a need for self-acceptance, but I was accepting myself. My need for self-acceptance, I can see the other person wasn't accepting themselves. So my need wasn't, I was seeing what wasn't being met in the other person. And I had self-acceptance myself.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's it shows your compassion. I appreciate that. Beautiful. Deborah, and then Mariko.
Okay, so this one is what my need was that wasn't met. Because this is helping so much. I just wanted to say before I start that when you were reading these universal needs, it was like soothing, like grandfather or father. To have the divine masculine in your voice, Scott, read those words was so calming and nurturing to my heart. Thank you.
Oh, thank you,
And
Deborah.
so it helps me so much to see what the other person was really needing. You know, I see with the other person that they were really needing safety and trust and respect and order and control, you know, and different things. My needs that weren't met when something happened was also for safety. It's interesting, you know, sacred reflection. So for safety, to be seen clearly, to be understood, to be trusted, connected, consistency, community, mutuality. There's some other things you said that were really important.
Well, just riffing for a moment. So thank you. That's Twinkle, Deborah. Thank you for sharing that. Two things I want to comment on. One, her first compliment, thank you. But in addition to the resonance in my voice, what she's reflecting is every one of these words is precious. Our universal human needs, our universal human values, this list is what we live for. We live for these words. And every one of these words is beautiful. So I just want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge when we have so many needs. Notice that Deborah, when she talked about her needs that weren't met and whatever it was that happened for her, there were so many words. And so we wonder why we sometimes go nuts. We wonder why sometimes we get really reactive. Well, when we have that many universal human needs or values that are being challenged or threatened or not met, we do go a little bit crazy. I'm not accusing Deborah of going crazy. I'm talking about any of us, all of us, when we have that many unmet needs taking place in a certain situation.
Yes, Scott, I just want to say super briefly, I could boil it all down just to peace, you know, just to peace and to be seen clearly. I was just using the list to articulate something, but for me it was to be seen clearly and peace. So it wasn't like a lot of stuff. It was just
Well, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Twinkling Deborah. Mariko, did you want to share something?
Yes. I would like help deconstructing this issue because being controlled is a huge thing that is something that repeats in my life a lot. And then when you look at that list, and I imagine, for example, my sister needs to control people, and so then when I look at that, I think, okay, she needs consistency and she needs structure.
Yeah.
Found myself not feeling that much less. Not feel. No, I was like, oh, that's nice.
So I'm really glad you brought up control. And I'm so glad you brought it up because this is really important, everybody. Whenever we perceive that someone's being controlling, they almost always are trying to meet their need for safety. Control is the number one strategy to meet the need for safety. And this brings up a really important point, differentiating between strategies and universal human needs. Control is a strategy. Safety is a universal human need. Money is a strategy to meet many of our needs. So and I'll get back to you in a second, Mariko, but just on this overall point. Anybody, think of someone that you perceive as really controlling. What are they trying to keep safe? Why is it that the more power someone has, the more controlling they become? Because they have more to lose. The wealthy person has more money to lose. The boss and the employee who has a large company or corporation has more to lose. The dictator, if you think about, probably the most, quote, evil people, the people that do the most destructive things, are dictators. If you take a look at recent dictators, they all lost their lives, right? They all ended up dying. They all ended up getting killed. Whether it's Gaddafi or Hussein, they had a lot to lose. And so as dictators, they took extreme measures to try and create safety through control. Now, certainly I'm not condoning dictators, but I am asking everyone, when you perceive someone as being controlling, drop into your heart. What are they trying to keep safe? What are they trying to keep safe? Okay, back to you, Mariko.
So I started thinking on the macro level about society, like Japanese society, and how I felt extremely controlled by that societal structure. And even though, like, for other people who don't have that need for small talk and human connection, or empathy with strangers, then that wasn't their need and they wouldn't be depressed about it. But for me, it was pain that was very real for me, and so that I started to gain a lot of weight because I was not able to. I felt that the society was controlling me. Um, and whether that was real or imaginary, my needs were not being met in that society. And as soon as I moved to Hawaii, I was able to lose weight and become what I felt like was a full person again. So then I just kind of I want to like look at, and you did mention dictators, and really nationalistic control is a very real thing. And Japan does create this controlled environment for ultimate safety. But the irony is, look at them now. Their numbers, they have like 1,000 people turning COVID every day, and it's not all of that preparation to create this ultimately safe society. It kind of doesn't work for them either.
Well, and just taking it to all of us, hey, we're experiencing more control from our governments than we have ever experienced in our lives. We can't go to the beach. We can't go to the parks. We can't hug each other, right? I mean, we are experiencing more control than any of us have ever experienced in our lives before. Why? Because it's a strategy to meet the need for safety. There's a perception that it's not safe to hug another person. It's not safe to go to a baseball game. It's not safe to be around other people. Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not that's true, but boy, we're all experiencing massive control to meet the need for safety. So it's really alive in our lives right now, isn't it? So, what have we learned? When you have a problem with somebody, when you have an issue, don't dehumanize them. Drop into seeing the beauty of the being and acknowledging it's a behavior or a choice they're making that bothers you. Then, which of their universal human needs are they trying to meet through that behavior? And which of your needs or values are being threatened or challenged? Do you notice how you now have a much bigger picture of what's going on? As opposed to just, God, he's such a jerk. It's like, oh, wow, he's really loud because he wants to be heard and understood. But his being loud doesn't meet my need and value for harmony and gentleness. Right? Everybody see that? Mandy, raising your hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was having all kinds of trouble with my laptop earlier, so then after you do those steps of, okay, I see examining their needs and what needs aren't being met on both sides and how can I understand them? Well then what? Like, how do you go about addressing that issue, especially if it's with your significant other? I mean, what do you go from there?
You get a gun and you shoot them. Kidding. So that's where we're going with this. That's exactly, thank you, Mandy, for setting us up, because that's exactly where we're going next. What do you do about it? You gather this information, and then you get your act together inside of yourself of, I want to understand and be understood. Remember Candace? It turned out that her thing was to understand and be understood. The purpose of any conversation, for those of you writing things down, write this down. The prime directive of any conversation where there's a difference must be to understand each other. The prime directive of any conversation exploring or about a difference is to understand each other. And you got to make sure that that's really in your consciousness. And I'm going to lead you through some steps. But remember that there are three things, I call them the pits. Some of you have heard me say this before. There are three pits that we can fall into that stop us from seeking to understand each other. The first pit is right, wrong. Remember, we're talking about self-righteous behavior. Trump is the best thing for black people, and I know it, and you need to know it. Well, that's a right-wrong dynamic, right? And we all do it. We all think we're right about certain things. So this is where each of us has to evolve a little bit. Because the moment we think we're right and the other one's wrong, we're not seeking to understand each other. We're trying to prove that we're right and they're wrong. Yes, Mandy.
So I've encountered issues where somebody else's perception of reality is completely incorrect in my view. And I know we've gone through this before, but it's so challenging, especially when both people are convinced of their reality and they want to fight about it. And literally you can't even come to an understanding that, like, for instance, like, I was like, no, my behavior, my choice was not what you perceive. Like, basically trying to correct them, like, I'm sorry that you perceive that. I empathize with you, but that was not the way I meant it. That is not the purpose, the intent, whatever that you perceive. So that is a huge struggle for me. Like, when it's like such an intense, the person is just misperceived completely. The reality is wrong in my opinion. And like, how do you even come to an agreement? Because like, I've had an issue with that once where I was like, I was literally saying, I need you to accept that that was not my intent. And they refused to accept that my explanation. And then it feels exasperating when you can't get a person to understand you. Like, we have no control over even getting a person to understand us, even when we explain till we're blue in the face.
Right. You're absolutely right. So let's take, and by the way, Laura, I saw your hand up. I'm going to respond to this, which is going to take a few minutes, and then I'm going to come to you. So great questions. Great questions. So let's just make up a scenario. Let's say that John and Sally go to a party, and Sally sees John talking to another person, and then they look over at Sally, and then goes back to talking to the other person, and he and the other person start laughing. Okay? And Sally perceives it as, oh my God, whatever it is, they're laughing about me. And Sally gets really upset and really hurt because she thinks that her husband is talking to another person and laughing about her. Okay? So, and in John's reality, that wasn't what was happening at all. They were laughing about something completely different. And the person said, hey, Sally here? Yeah, Sally's right over there. But you got it. Let me tell you what then happened. The laughter had nothing to do with Sally. Okay? But Sally is now in a hallucination that her husband is making fun of her with another person. And let's add to it that Sally had a childhood where her father used to always tease her, and the family used to make fun of her and laugh at her. Okay? So Sally has a big frigging wound about being made fun of and laughed at. And so now Sally is really upset. Sally leaves the party. She storms outside. John has to stop what he's doing and run after her. And she's crying. I can't believe that you would do that. I can't believe you'd make fun of me. Right? Let's say that's the dynamic. Even though Sally is hallucinating and was inaccurate in her perception, her pain is real. And that's why we always bring it down to feelings and needs. And it's really hard when someone is in pain that we care about, and we see that they're in pain because of a hallucination, a misinterpretation, the exact thing that Mandy just brought up. It's really hard. And our natural human instinct is to want to fix it by telling them that their perception was wrong. Guess what? We're pouring gasoline onto the fire. We are pouring gasoline onto the fire because we're denying their reality. We don't agree. John doesn't agree. You're right. I was making fun of you. John acknowledges how much pain she's in. Oh, baby. Can I just hold you for a minute? Can I hold you? If he's lucky, she'll say yes. If he's unlucky, no. I can't stand you. I don't want to be touched by you. So you drop into acknowledging. So you really thought I was laughing at you. You really thought we were laughing at you. And it triggered that horrible pain you've got from your childhood. Yes, you should know by now. I can't stand it. Why would you do that? Honey, I'm so sorry that that's how you experienced it. And, oh my God, that's so painful. And I swear to you, we were laughing at you. And I'll tell you what was happening when you're ready to hear it. But right now, I want to hold you and let you know I love you. I'm not laughing at you. I love you so much. Reassurance, reassurance, reassurance. Not, you're crazy. That wasn't what was happening at all. Why are you so crazy? See, that's the horrible thing that we can do, is we go into really making that person wrong. I'm going to give you one more analogy that often is helpful because I teach this a lot. Imagine if you had a 5-year-old child, and the 5-year-old child or 6-year-old child has their own bedroom. And in the middle of the night, you hear the little kid crying, and you come running in to see what's wrong. And the child is crying and scared shitless because he or she absolutely believes there's a monster in the closet. Absolutely believes it. There's a monster in the closet. There's a monster in the closet. Well, ideally, you're not going to scream at them. There's no such things as monsters, and there's no monsters in the closet. You're not going to do that. You're going to hold them. You're going to comfort them. It's okay. I'm here now. I'm going to turn the light on. I'm right here. Right here. It's okay. And then after they're comforted, you ask, do you want me to check and see if the monster's gone? No, not yet. Not yet. Okay. I gotcha. I gotcha. You hold them. And then finally, okay, maybe look slowly and see. Monster's gone. Monster's not here. You don't deny the reality. You come down to their experience. You drop into their world. You drop into their experience and acknowledge their uncomfortable feelings, which were real. And then after they feel safe, after they feel comforted, after they know you love them and reassured, then you can decide whether or not it's worth talking about monsters and monsters in the closet and the difference between a dream and reality or not. It kind of depends on the situation. Does that make sense to everybody so far? And it's the Love Coach Academy motto. We have two mottos: empathy first and how perfectly human. Those are our two mottos. We lead with empathy. We lead with empathy. Now, usually, the person who's hurt, so going back to Mandy's situation, even after Mandy's explained herself, the person still wants to argue. One of two things. Either they still don't feel understood for their pain, and it may be the re-stimulated pain, using the John and Sally example. Sally's childhood wounding has been so re-stimulated that she's really needing a lot of empathy and understanding for her pain. Or some people have a cultural conditioning that arguing is connecting. There are people that arguing is connecting. There are certain cultures, you can probably imagine what they are, but I won't say them because I don't want to make what could be a prejudicial statement. But there are certain cultures that arguing at the dinner table is what families do, right? There are certain people, couples, that arguing is what we do. For some people, arguing is foreplay before great sex, okay? I mean, this is true for some people, right? And you got to decide, okay, what's their cultural conditioning? What does arguing mean to them? And then you got to talk about it, probably bring in a coach, right? At that point, it's time to bring in one of the people on this call as your coach, right? Mimi, I'm loving your laughing, by the way. I can see that this is ringing some bells for you. Anything you want to add or share?
I do. I grew up with a big Irish family, military, and that's what we did. That's how you connected, was you were loud and you argued, and that's how you showed your love for each other. I mean, the vibrancy was a high level, so I had to unlearn that. But yes, that's very true for some cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. Mandy, thank you, Mimi.
I want to just add to that there's this cool show on Netflix, which is actually a good homework if you have the time, about going back to the ex and Love is Blind. There's two different shows, and they're reality TV, but it's really interesting as a love coach, watching these scenarios and learning from them and learning how, oh, they could have been more empathetic there. They could have been more understanding there. They could have used this tool or that tool. And it's been fascinating for me doing this work, watching these shows, and I get so emotionally invested in their process. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could help them. And I wish I could. But anyway, there was this one where it's like this Giannina girl is from a Venezuelan family, and she's having this big blow up argument with her fiance. And she's yelling and kind of cussing, and he's like, hey, don't yell at me, and I don't like it. And she's like, well, everyone in my family argues and yells. And he's like, well, I don't like it, don't yell at me. So she goes to the other extreme, and she starts whispering, like, she's like, I'm angry. And it was just hilarious to watch that she was trying, but she went to like an extreme to not yell, like she was like whispering.
Oh, that's great.
But
And
it was
it's called Love is Blind. Love is Blind.
Love is Blind on Netflix.
Okay, I'll check it out. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. It was just cool.
Okay, I want to hear from, because I promised Laura, and then I'll hear from Miriam, and just always try and give you comments applicable to the group, if at all possible. And then I want to get back to the practice, because we're in the middle of a practice. But Laura, you're up.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to what Mandolin was talking about, and using what I've learned so far here and in other places, this practice of empathy first, and then if there's any discussion. Now, Scott, you said that the focus should be on understanding each other first and foremost, but what I have found is that some people in that situation, when their story is different than the reality you experienced, and it's about interpreting your behavior, you may have, or I often have, a need to be understood, and the other person does not share that value reciprocated. So they don't want to understand. And trying to make myself understood is actually offensive.
Yeah. So that's really hard when that's the situation, Laura. I just want to acknowledge, yeah, I have a sister like that. She has no interest in understanding. Again, the more self-righteous someone is, the less interested they are in understanding. There's a great quote by Einstein, which I'm paraphrasing. The true measure of intelligence is the ability to change our belief system. How fast can we change our belief system? That's intelligence. Spoken from probably one of the most intelligent people in the last 100 years. So a little bit later, we'll get into how to set boundaries with compassion, because that's what sometimes we have to do with somebody who genuinely doesn't want to understand us. Dawn, in 1 second, there's one thing that I just want to make sure. Here's another rule. Never argue about different memories of the past. Never argue about different memories of the past. It's so common that people will have very different memories of the past, and especially if the past memory is something that was very emotionally volatile or chaotic or archetypal or dramatic, we will have radically different memories. Here's just a couple of little things to know. So let's say Timothy and I are in a heated argument. And in my imagination, I'm thinking what I'm going to retort. I have a retort or something that I'm going to say to him. But the conversation goes in such a direction that actually the words never come out of my mouth. But my brain stores the memory of what we are going to say in such a way that I might truly believe tomorrow or next week that I said it. And we can get into an argument. I said clearly, and I really will remember that I said it. And Timothy is going crazy because he didn't hear it. And I really believe I said it. There's another crazy thing that the brain does. When we do something, say something or take an action that's outside of our self-concept or outside of the way we want to be seen by others, our brain can block it. This is why people don't remember that they went crazy and did crazy shit the next day, right? Our brain blocks it, right? We will honestly not remember it because our brain is saying, no, that's different from the way I want people to see me, or that's different from my self-concept, so I'm not going to remember that I actually said or did that. I just had a couple I was working with a couple days ago, and it got heated, and I came in and stopped it, but before I could stop it, he said something violent. And he absolutely, 30 seconds later, did not remember that he said it. Well, luckily, we recorded it, you know. I didn't go back and play it right then, but I said, go back and watch it. But both his girlfriend and I heard him say it, and 30 seconds or a minute later, he did not remember that he had said it because he had gotten so consumed by his reptile brain that he said something really ugly and horrible that's outside of the way he sees himself. So it's really important to remember these pieces and never, ever, ever argue about different memories. Don't argue about what's happened in the past. Bring it into present time. I want to understand you right now. Miriam and then Mariko. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was, did we hear from Miriam? It's Miriam, then Dawn, then Mariko, if I'm remembering the order of people who have raised their hand. Miriam, then Dawn, then Mariko.
For me, this exercise was really valuable because I realized that for instance, my mother-in-law and I have very similar needs that are being unmet. So her need for autonomy, to be seen, power, inclusion, you know, she lived in an area that wasn't so great. So she had a very negative view of minorities. But what got to me about her wasn't her lived experience. I accept that she was treated unfairly, because I too had experiences with different groups of people, including my own, and including, you know, all different types. I've, you know, experienced prejudice. But the issue I had was more that she would, well, for lack of a better word, she would stereotype, and then she would see me as the exception. So she would go on Facebook and say, Muslims do this, Blacks do this, Hispanics do this. And she was being supported by us, basically. But when I really look at this from a higher level parachute view, I realized that I have the need for acceptance and understanding that I wasn't receiving from her. You know, we both had a similar style. And I too was, in a way, I was mirroring her. I didn't set clear boundaries. I said, oh, it's my mother-in-law, it's okay if she stays with us. But inside I was feeling resentful. So in a sense, I was doing what she was doing by, like, you know, not stating her needs. And, you know, she tends to be very passive. And I realized what Trump brought out in her was the need for, like, safety and security, because she likes to have control over situations in her life. She hasn't had a lot of control. And so with Trump, it's like he gave her that, you know, she liked him because he's very powerful. I mean, whether you like him or not, he brings out that sense of power and safety, and our country will, you know, and I understand that. And I told her, actually, there was a positive conversation with her about Trump, you know, that, you know, he does want, well, I mean, I don't necessarily 100% agree with this, but he wants, quote unquote, what's best for Americans. That was her, you know, he wants what's best for us.
So
Yeah.
twinkling, I want to twinkle you, Miriam. So that's beautiful. And I want
Right.
to acknowledge that what you did was you dropped into her world. And also, probably her belief in Trump helps to meet her need for inclusion.
Inclusion, exactly.
Right, the need for inclusion. And we all have a big need for inclusion. Most people belong to gangs, religious organizations, political parties, because it meets our need for inclusion, right? So that's an important thing to remember. So thank you for giving that example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dawn and then Mariko.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for calling on me. I just wanted to share a little bit. I think everyone's shares have been so beautiful, and I really understand deeply everyone's perspective. And I think what's coming forward is a part of me that's really helped me when I'm in a difficult, triggered conversation with someone, like Manny's share, for instance, you know, where she's like, how do you, when someone's perceiving it some way and then you just can't, there's nothing you can do to really help that person understand. Really what's helped me is like, wow, how can I cleanse my lens perception right now? Like I have that thought go through my mind. And really, it's for me, what has helped when I'm in a difficult situation like that is to really just breathe and to really take ownership of like, wow, I acknowledge I'm showing up this way in this relationship. Take ownership of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Take responsibility for yourself and your actions. And that always will help the other person go, oh, okay. You are understanding, you know, it helps them shift into a place of being able to like, oh, okay, you are getting it. Like, because when you fully acknowledge what's going on and how you're showing up, then it gives spaciousness for the other person to do the same in the conversation.
Beautiful. And what you're talking about is, again, understanding each other. You're giving them the gift of understanding them. Either understanding what they're feeling, understanding what they're needing. And when people feel understood, they're more likely, it's not a guarantee, but they're more likely to want to understand you. You know, I'm imagining, Miriam, when you understood your mother-in-law, it opened a little bit of a door. It cracked things open a little bit, right? So, and that's why it's always up to us to ideally lead with seeking to understand the other person. If we're lucky, it'll open the door. Sometimes we're unlucky. Sometimes that person's like, no, I don't want to understand you. you know, and that's really frustrating when we open the door, we give empathy, we seek to understand, and they're still like, you know, and that's a little bit later. We're almost there. We'll get to that's where we have to set boundaries. Mariko and then Timothy. You're muted, Mariko. Mariko, you're muted. Okay, I'll try and unmute you. Okay, now we can hear you.
Oh, so whenever I find myself in a situation where people are invalidating my experience, my reaction is to prove that they're doing that, because maybe they don't see that they're gaslighting me. But then I also have to stop myself and see that behavior and then go, is that really a relationship that I want to push forward in my life or not? And then I find myself noticing that I'm wanting to prove that I'm not crazy. But then once I've gotten to that level, it really just breaks the relationship.
Yeah.
Like, it's over.
Yeah.
I don't need to prove to you that you gaslighted me, but I don't need to hang out with you anymore either.
Yeah, and one thing, if it is a relationship that you're wanting to support, rather than calling it gaslighting, a really good word to use is confused. Wow, I'm confused because what I experienced is this, and what I'm hearing you say is that. Just acknowledging I feel confused is a wonderful way to manage that. Okay. I am going to call a 2-minute break because honestly, I need to use the bathroom. My dog needs to come inside. So just a quick 2-minute break. If anybody needs to go to the bathroom, this is your chance to do it. We'll be right back. Do I hear Jasmine Bear? Do I hear Jasmine Bear?
Hey, Christopher, can you hear me? Are you comfortable playing out loud while we're on this break? No, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, kind of just got this thing. I don't really know how to play ukulele.
Yeah, me too. I have one and I'm trying to learn as well.
All right, on. So I'm like slowly learning chords. I do play guitar. I'm a classical guitarist, actually. But yeah, I don't really know chords or anything, and that's pretty much all a ukulele is. It's just little finger placements and strumming, right? But I mean, so.
Okay, different question. If you were to suggest a affordable laptop for video editing, just basic video editing, like small things, small projects, what would you suggest?
It's not necessarily about the maker of the laptop that matters so much anymore. As a matter of fact, like they're all pretty much up on such the same pedestal that it really doesn't matter. What does matter is your graphics card. And specifically, if you're getting something with video editing software in mind, what you're going to want to look for is something with a decent graphics card that has an SSD, a solid state drive. Basically, what that's going to do is take like when you're parsing your video and you're done editing it, if you don't have an SSD and you don't have a good enough card, it'll take you 24 hours like for that to process to finish. Whereas an SSD will do it in like 30 minutes. So that's really important. It'll make everything go smoother. You know, I'm actually looking around for a laptop for myself. I'm supposed to be getting one kind of soon here. And I was looking for something affordable that's actually very good for graphics. So you know what? I'll connect with you on Facebook and tell you a couple of my options.
Great. I'd love that. Message me. Thank you.
Awesome. Will do.
All right. So let's come on back. Timothy, I think you had raised your hand.
Yeah, piggybacking on Mariko, I find that when I'm in relationship with someone where we're both triggered to a state of psychosis, where we're literally like unconscious parts of ourselves are driving the conflict, and we're both in a way out of an ability to center or to be able to come back to self, then no amount of coaching, no amount of therapy can actually help us understand each other. We are in a really polarized, strongly polarized state. And even when I've been able to know that, I've found it difficult to come to a place where this, this other person and I could talk. And so I think there are times where we have to just accept that it's beyond our current ability to understand or at least be understood one way or the other, or both, right? Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's just me not understanding them not understanding me. And having the wisdom to know that we're in that kind of a state and really be able to take space and get support that understands how to work with people on this level. I often wish I had had that knowledge before. And so now I look for it sometimes when I'm working with clients of, are we in this kind of a thing, when it goes on and on and on. And it can be, I think, really damaging to continually try to bring these two forces together. Sometimes I think it is important to say, hey, space is needed here, so for what it's worth.
Timothy, no, it's tranquil, Timothy. I agree. And it's painful. It's painful when someone we've been close to, we've reached that place where one or both people, and I just want to describe what that place usually is. One or both people are very attached to a judgment of the other. That's what it is, right? And if they're not willing, if the one or both of them are not willing to let go of the judgment and to see the other in present time, or to see the other one differently, or to understand the other, you're right. You need to separate. And that's a perfect segue into boundaries with compassion. I just wanted to mention one of the things we kind of got it off sidetracked. I just want to remind people of the 3 pits that stop us from understanding each other, because we talked about the first pit, which is right, wrong, but I just want to cover the other 2 pits. The second pit is attack and defend. The moment we think we have been attacked, you're such a jerk. My God, you're an idiot. What do you say? And somebody says that, and boom, now we're in defending ourselves. And in defending ourselves, we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, none of which creates quality connection. And then the third one is when we're in a power struggle, right? So attack and defend, power struggle, right, wrong, are the 3 pits that we as human beings can fall into that stop us from understanding each other. And what Timothy just described usually is probably all 3 of those things, right? When a relationship is that polarized, all 3 of them are there. I'm right and the other person's wrong. And he hurt me and I will never be hurt by that person again. And I am going to clearly, and it's got to be my way, all those pits, right? And then just creates this incredible impossibility to understand each other, to even be willing to seek to understand each other. And it's tragic when that happens. It's tragic. It is absolutely tragic. Mandy.
Along those lines, I mean, that all of that really, really resonated with me with some of the situations I've encountered. But, on the other side of it is sometimes it just takes some time after an incident like that, where it's like both people are so triggered and they like lose all control of their reactivity. And that can even happen to the best of us, like depending on what the argument's about. And sometimes it just takes time for that energy to calm down to a space where you can process what happened and think about it and then reconnect and talk about it again. Because I've gone through that where it was like, what the hell just happened? How did that trigger explode into this like gasoline fueled volcanic eruption. And it's like, but then later you can go back and talk about it and come to a place of calm talking and understanding. I've gone through that, but it's when you're in that, in the thick of the heat of the argument, it can be very painful. And it is what it is, you know, it's an experience.
Well, Mandy, that's why we teach connected timeouts, right? That's why we teach connected timeouts. And that's a fundamental teaching of Love Coach Academy. Every couple I work with, first session, I teach them connected timeouts. And the couples that do connected timeouts argue a lot less, and the ones that really practice it stop arguing. And the couples that don't do it argue, you know. I'll put into the thread again my video on how to take connected timeouts, because I don't have time to go into it today, but it's about a 30-minute video, and it's a really, really, really good video. So I really strongly encourage people to watch it and practice it. Yeah. Anybody want to do a testimonial for how connected timeouts has helped you? Any of our more advanced students have been around? Timothy.
The video is great. Anne Mandolin did a class with her partner on connected times out, and I took notes, and I've been using that with the couples that I get to coach as well as with families, because I teach a form of taking space, but the kind of 7-part process that Mandolin helped really line out, and then your video has helped me take my practice of teaching people to take space and then given them really good things to do while they're taking space, so that when they come back together, they can reconnect. And, you know, if we come back to the extreme polarization case, I think it's more than a connected timeout. It's like a connected, spacious week apart sometimes. You know, sometimes it's like, I know for me, I need to go backpacking with my friends and get the hell away from the house and the kids and you, and come back to myself so that I can come back and appreciate the house and you and the kids. You know? So like connected timeout being a really spacious, longer frame sometimes.
Thank you, Timothy, for sharing that. That really means a lot to me. It feels nice that the content I was able to share is able to help you and others.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you, Mandy, for that. That was a great class that you taught that time. That was a great class. So Twinkling Mandy. All right. We're going to go in our last half hour into one of the hardest things to do in our world, setting boundaries with compassion. Sometimes we're really good at setting the boundary, but we don't do it with compassion. And other times, we're such loving, kind, compassionate people, but we just don't set good boundaries. Right? So I'm not going to call anybody, but just by raise of hands, who has experienced setting a really strong boundary but not doing it compassionately? Who's done that sometimes? Okay. And who's been really compassionate but got walked all over, did not set a good enough boundary? And who's done both, right? Most of us have done both. It's interesting to note that it usually has to do with whether or not we think we're the bigger reptile. If you really take a look at which relationships you set big boundaries and you're not compassionate, you probably feel like you have more power or authority in those relationships. And in the relationships where you struggle, it might be, not always, but it's just something to think about. Okay. So what I'm about to say, it's perfectly worded, so write it down. Write it down or record it. I mean, we're recording this, but record this a little bit. When setting a boundary, always lead with authentic reassurance that you care. When setting a boundary, always lead with authentic reassurance that you care. Why is this so important? It works in both ways. We struggle to set a boundary because we're afraid the person's going to think we don't care, or the person might accuse us of not caring. So we always want to, right off the bat, establish, I really do care about you, whatever it is. Now, remember, you'll notice I said authentic reassurance. So it really depends on what the situation is, what your relationship to that person is. It's a person by person relationship kind of thing. But you got to acknowledge, hey, our friendship is really important to me. Our relationship is important to us. I really want us to have the best relationship possible. Whatever it is that's real, establish that. But then really go into acknowledging and setting the boundary. So it's kind of like, I call it a boundary sandwich. Lead with authentic reassurance that you care, set the boundary, and then the other side, the other piece of bread, if you will, of the sandwich, is be present to the beauty of their unmet need and whatever uncomfortable feelings they're having. You set the boundary and then give presence to the beauty of their unmet need and their uncomfortable feelings. So let's say a mythical Joe asks Dawn out on a date. And Dawn and Joe work together, and she wants to have a good relationship with Joe, but she's not available. She's married, and she's not interested in Joe that way. Ideally, Dawn establishes reassurance. Hey, Joe, my friendship with you is important. I'm not available for dating. I'm very happily married. And maybe you didn't know that. And, thank you for, the courage that maybe it took to ask, the beauty of your desire to explore a deeper friendship. And, maybe you're feeling a little disappointed, maybe even a little bit embarrassed that you asked, right? Like she sets her boundary, but in the middle of it is care at the beginning and care at the end. And we show care by acknowledging what they were needing and what uncomfortable feelings they might have been feeling. And man, Joe's devastated. Dawn's not going to go out with him. He's been spending weeks trying to figure out how to ask her out, right? So, does that make sense to everybody? Is it the boundary sandwich? Yeah. Any thoughts, questions, or reflections before we continue?
I have one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. I also wanted to say, if for me, because some of this stuff was a new experience, that I didn't put it in a time frame. That if it was a real struggle for me to come up with some boundaries, I stopped with the idea that I had to do this in a certain amount of time, even though I'm a coach, even though this is my practice. There's sometimes that it's just so messy and so uncomfortable and so uncharted that I just go with, there is no time frame that this has to fit into. So I feel like the self-grace in there of considering that I may not have the resources yet, but I know that I'll go out and source myself over these coming weeks or over these coming months to better understand this for myself first. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we set a boundary, we need to really think it through. What is the boundary and why am I trying to set this, right? Why is this important to me? And to be prepared to ideally explain, because when we're saying no to one thing, we're saying yes to something else. And it's okay and sometimes helpful to establish why we're setting the boundary. Miriam, am I seeing you raise your hand? I can't hear you. You're muted. I can't hear
I
you.
just had a quick comment. So you mentioned that sometimes it's easier to, make a boundary when we are the one up in the situation, the bigger reptile. And I just want to bring up that usually that's true for me. However, with, going through a chronic illness and having anger at doctors sometimes for feeling unheard and unseen, I've actually been able to successfully set boundaries, but I realized that in order to do that, I've actually had to get, well, I haven't, and this is when I'm going to reframe this. I've actually gotten angry and it works sometimes. Like I got my needs met. I said, and here's the deal. So sometimes I've reported doctors to their director. So for me, it feels like I'm being angry, but I wonder if I'm just being I'm not used to being assertive because I'm pretty empathic and sensitive and quiet. So I wonder if I think I'm being angry, but I'm really just being assertive. But on other occasions, I feel like I really have gone into anger, and it actually has worked. So I like when and this is more of a comment, and I actually want to hear more what you have to say about this. But I like when you said sometimes you set a good boundary and it's actually kind of not maybe done with compassion and it works versus being, stepped all over. So I feel like sometimes I am being assertive and I misinterpret it as anger. And then sometimes I feel like I really have gone into anger and it's worked. I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I'm not proud of that. It's just that I felt like so, when you feel like you're dying and your health is so at stake and vulnerable, it's like I felt like anger was the only way out. It was like, gosh, I feel so terrible that I don't care how the doctor feels. I care how I feel because I don't feel like my health is being jeopardized. So kind of just a comment on that. And you've really helped me gain a lot of perspective today. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, anger is not bad. It needs to be managed.
Exactly.
But again, this is how to set boundaries with compassion. And so, of course, there are times that we've been so pushed, we haven't set a clear enough boundary. And and if we stuff, and then sometimes it's like the pendulum swings in the opposite direction. And I'm guessing, based on what I heard from your story, Miriam, that may have been what happened. The pendulum swung in the opposite direction, and you needed the anger to give you the strength to set the boundary. Would that be accurate?
Exactly. And then, like I said, sometimes I wonder if I was really even being angry. I was so passive before sometimes that I feel like maybe I was just being assertive in some situations and reflection. So it's like really trying to discern my assertiveness versus my true anger. Sometimes I really did go into anger because I was pissed off at these doctors, but sometimes it was just, assertiveness. And then I questioned myself and I said, I would think about it at night. Was I too hard on them? But the sicker and sicker I got, I just started to not care. But now I'm like in that parachute view where I really want to assess my ways of being with other people and come up with better ways of communicating with people, even doctors that I don't agree with. So that's why this class is really helping me. Yes, you're right on. Actually, spot on.
And remember, I talked about how oftentimes when we have trouble setting a boundary, it's especially hard with somebody that's an authority figure, someone that we feel has more power than we do. And we, of course, tend to, we have a tendency to give our power away to doctors, lawyers, police, authority figures. Right? Does it make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So, what do we do when somebody crosses our boundary? What do we do when we've set a clear boundary and someone doesn't honor it? That's a really tough one. That is so hard when that happens. It's really, really hard. Mandy.
Well, first and foremost, I mean, you just have to make the other person aware of it. Whether or not they meant to do it, but you just have to at least start the conversation of, hey, that I had established this boundary and you crossed it. And and then go from there.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. That's a very important first step. Mimi, what comes up for you?
On boundaries, I continue to ask into the question, am I totally agreeing to this boundary? Are there things that I haven't said because I feel like maybe they'll withdraw from love for me if I do set a really clear boundary? Or if I agree to this, am I agreeing to it for what period of time as like a trial run? So that's me on both counts. Like, how am I making certain that I'm being accountable for myself? Because there are times that I've agreed to something and then I'm like, oh yeah, no, this doesn't work at all. And so like, is there a grace period? Yes, I'm willing to try this for this period of time, and then reestablish connection.
There's really outstanding. So big twinkling for both, for the two M's, Mandolin and Mimi. Good job. I want to riff on what Mimi said, because often we struggle setting a boundary because we're afraid that person's going to withdraw love, friendship, or care. And so when somebody repeatedly crosses the boundary, it puts us into one of the hardest places we can be in relationship. It's really hard. We have to evaluate, what are we getting from that person in present time, and what is the price we pay for them crossing that boundary? And it really requires some self-reflection. I'll say it again. What are we getting from that relationship in present time? And what's the price we're paying for it? And it really requires some consideration. Yes, Mimi?
I just want to add to that I want to take ownership there too, because I've also been known to withdraw love or emotional connection if the person won't do as I'm requesting. And so that's why I think that it's negotiation. It isn't just one established boundary that stays established. This is a boundary. What are your needs here? What are my needs here? And I want to make sure that that you're being met, because I want your 100% full yes. If you're like, I'm agreeing to this because I'm afraid you're going to withdraw from me, that's not really the same thing. So there's like tiny little pieces to navigate through there if the same scenario keeps rising up.
Absolutely. I agree that it depends on the situation. I mean, it's not a negotiation if it's a boundary around safety, especially physical safety. You know, I mean, no means no when it comes to a sexual advance or a physical advance. But in other situations, I agree it's a negotiation. One little tip, having worked with people a lot, not always, of course, but frequently, we will cut a person's slack based on our previous friendship with them. We stay loyal because we have all these years of friendship, or we've invested all this time and energy. And that's why it's important to come into present time. In present time, what am I getting from this relationship? And in present time, what price am I paying? And sadly, often we're actually in relationships beyond their expiration date, right? Not all relationships are meant to last forever, even love relationships, you know? And so we do have to keep reevaluating. I look at Timothy. I'm going to put the spotlight on Timothy. Go back to, he's got it. Yeah, there it is. That's, yeah. Sorry, buddy. We come into this world alone and we usually die alone, right? So when look, I'm a love coach. I'm always promoting love. But relationships often have an expiration date, and we need to be aware of that. When am I putting out much more than I'm getting back? When is the price that I'm paying greater than the pleasure I'm receiving? Now, a great example of that, let's take it away from a relationship with people, relationship to substances, right? Probably most of us at one point or another had a time in our life that we were drinking alcohol or smoking pot or taking drugs. And there was a time when it was really fun. And then we reached a time where it's like, you know what, I'm getting older, I've got more responsibilities. The price I'm paying for my relationship to this substance is not worth the pleasure that it currently brings me. Right? Most of us have probably been in a relationship with substances like that. Maybe even junk food. Most of us, when we were teenagers, ate junk food. As we got older, we stopped, right? Or we changed it, hopefully. So it's the same way sometimes with people. There's some people that were great relationships for a particular time in our life, and then we graduate beyond that. And it's painful. And we need to mourn, need to acknowledge the change. But another piece, anybody want to mention anything about that part of it, that kind of sad part? No. We have Timothy's face to remember. Oh, Timothy's going to say something.
Yeah, it's I think when we, it's so key to be able to know, and it's difficult when it's time to just end a relationship beautifully. It's like that last moment where we jump from the rock to the bed of the creek and we're both on opposite sides and nobody got wet, right? Whereas when there's deep love involved, God, most of the time I find I'm so invested, I'm hanging in there until I'm like hanging from a noose and about to die. And then finally, somebody shoots the cord for me, I guess, and I fall to the ground and I'm able to crawl away. And those are the ones that, there's one in particular that there's this huge part of my heart that still wants to try to work it out, wants to try to figure out what the hell went wrong. And that's the hard stuff. That's where there's that addictive quality or that compulsive behavior in me, that love addict that doesn't want to let go of a situation that's actually harmful to both of us,
Yeah, yeah.
So there is
Absolutely.
sadness that stays.
About a third of the couples that come to me now, I end up actually coaching them to uncouple. And I never realized that's what my job was going to be. But I attract a lot of people that just need help in consciously uncoupling. And sometimes I've even facilitated, I'm not there physically with what I'm about to say, but make love one last time and mourn and celebrate and know this is the last time we're going to be together in this way. And it can be a very beautiful and rich experience. Conscious uncoupling is a thing, and it's something I've learned a lot about. I had to do it myself with Emily 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Okay, we're kind of coming to the end. I want to just bring up a couple of last little points. When somebody consistently breaks the boundary, we don't want to punish them, but we do need to come up with a consequence that we will hold to. And that's, again, a hard part. It requires a certain amount of really thinking it through. If this person continues to cross my boundary, again, weigh it. What am I getting from this person in the relationship? What am I losing? Why do I need the boundary? And if it keeps being crossed, what's a consequence? Not a punishment, but a consequence that I will uphold and stay with. And that can be really, really challenging to figure out because there's so many factors. There's your loyalty to the person, there's what they provide, wanting to be nice, not wanting to be, a punisher. And that's where usually it's good to have a coach to work with, call upon one of the people in Love Coach Academy. Hey, Mimi. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Mandy. Hey, Anna Prabha. Timothy. Can you help me with this one? Because it's hard. It's really hard. Yes, Mandy. And then Mariko.
I can see with that one how a slight challenge of differentiating, a consequence versus punishment. I mean, that's kind of up to the eyes of the perceiver because it depends on the individual relationship in the situation. For instance, I had a stalker and I said, look, I'm going to put you on a 5-step program. If you keep stalking me, I'm going to file a police report. I'm going to put up maybe some kind of order.
A restraining order.
Yeah,
Illustrating
that was the
one.
last one. But I had a few steps and they kept doing it. And so I enacted my word and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go make a police report about you. So it's really up to the perception and the situation of what is a consequence, what is a punishment, because there are times that it may look like a punishment, but it's something that you have to do for your own self-preservation, depending on the person and the situation.
You're absolutely right, Mandy. You're absolutely right. And we do our best to explain it as a consequence. And a lot of it is our own energy. Like, if we're about making that person wrong, it's got more of an energy of punishment. Whereas if we're just clear, this is my boundary, this is why, and this is the consequence, and we're cleaner with it, without it being about that person being bad, stupid, or wrong, it has a less of a vibe of a punishment. And that's where we have to look inside of ourselves. Timothy in a second, Mariko and then Timothy. Because sometimes we want to punish the person. Sometimes that is in our field of thinking. And that's where we have to be self-reflective enough to recognize, oh, wow, I'm really wanting to punish this person. I want them to hurt. And that's the thing. A consequence is challenging. A punishment sometimes is hurtful, right? Is my intention to hurt this person, or is my intention to protect myself? You know, Aikido is the martial art form that goes along with nonviolent communication. And part of the genius of Aikido is that our first goal is to protect ourselves. And our second goal is to protect our attacker. So it's in our consciousness, how can I protect myself and how can I protect my attacker? As opposed to, how can I hurt my attacker the most? And that's a good way to determine the difference between a punishment and a consequence. Consequence, I'm protecting myself. Punishment is, I want to hurt you, motherfucker, right? And so just recognizing when we're in that mindset. Okay. Mariko, I think, had raised her hand. Where is Mariko? Oh, there she is. Mariko and then Timothy.
I think that the challenge that a lot of people who have faced the continuum of violence do like really work extra hard on is this piece of maintaining that relationship, because you've been in a situation where you've had to deal with the fight or flight situation so intensely that that's kind of the work that I've had to do to deal with sexual and relationship violence, just kind of being able to have these conversations and not be like, oh, you're cut off. You know, I'm not safe, you're cut off. And this then extends, and I've seen this very much so in like people of color oppression communities, where it's like, oh, I'm not safe, you're the enemy, you're supporting this power structure. I'm not safe here. This person's not safe to have in here. Kick them out. I'm quitting. You need to kick them out or I'm quitting. There's a lot of that. Like, it's a very ultimatum-based safety structure. And to get out of that and know that it's okay to be less black and white is an ongoing challenge, I think, that I constantly have to work on. And I've come from a black and white structure to being more rainbow and shades. But I definitely still second question myself when it comes down to, am I overreacting and being triggered, or do I have a fundamental need to be safe right now?
That's a beautiful inquiry, you know, and it's an inquiry to bring to Love Coach Academy. You know, bring it to Mimi, bring it to one of us, you know, explore it. Because probably both things are there. There's always a fundamental need that we have that's driving us, even if it's driving our thinking. And then to what degree are we overreacting because of our veils of past pain, right? Our previous triggers. Timothy, in a moment, I just want to address something that Daniel said, I noticed in the chat box, about understanding the boundary. Put it in writing and have a witness. If at all possible, again, as a coach, I say, okay, I'm going to hold you, let's put it in writing, and I'm going to hold you accountable. And that's one of the best things we can do as coaches, is to encourage especially if it's a mother and daughter or a couple that are fighting, agreements, put them in writing, and we hold them accountable. And I have had situations where I've said, okay, if this, we've agreed to this boundary, if the boundary is crossed, notify me. I just last week worked with a couple that have separated, and they've agreed to a 30-day no contact boundary. And I've said, if one of you just slips and has a slip, I want you to let me know. Let me know. Either of you, let me know there was a slip here. I'm not going to punish you, but I'm going to hold you accountable to keeping the boundary and understanding why you crossed it. And people really appreciate that. So, and I'm not a cop. I'm a coach, right? I'm not going to punish, right? I'm not going to arrest, but I'm going to seek to understand why did you break the agreement? What's going on with you? Timothy.
Yeah, two things. In my languaging, agreements can be negotiated. Boundaries are solid. And when I'm coaching people, parents especially, I'm always talking to them about, do not create a boundary that you can't follow through with. And I call it self-care, what the self-care is going to be on the other side. So if I create a boundary with Scott and Scott breaks the boundary, then I follow the process that Scott's outlining where I want to seek to understand, did you hear the boundary? Did you not understand it? Should we put it in writing? Try to get even more clear, right? It's not like one strike, you're out. But by the time I really understand, Scott gets the boundary, he's agreeing to the boundary. So it's gone from a negotiable thing to a solid thing. It's not something that, if Scott's going to cross the boundary, he's not supposed to break it. He's supposed to come back and talk to me about it first, right? And rather than a consequence, I just want Scott to understand that if you do break the boundary, then my self-care is going to be to go sleep in the guest bedroom, or to go away to my mother's house for a week, or whatever it is that my self-care practice is. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about it again. And I might have a boundary that has an actual consequence, which is the relationship's over, or, you know, that's more significant than self-care, right? It's still self-care, but it's that I try to use the word consequence only when it's like a really permanent thing, because consequence for most people triggers punishment or consequence, something drastic will happen. So I try to use the language of, okay, I make a boundary, you break the boundary, then this is how I'm going to take care of myself. I need you to know that ahead of time. Or the consequence is going to be this. And I just try to separate it a little bit so that people are registering, oh, wow, there's really going to be a consequence. The consequence is the relationship's over, or I'm sending you to live with your grandpa in Iowa.
It's beautiful. Right on. Right on. Right on. That kind of fits along with Mandy's 5-step program, right? Like the different steps, right? Which is in complicated relationship. That's a good idea. We are at noon. I've got a big day today, so I'm going to wrap us up. But a few announcements. First off, I'm really proud of all the love coaches that are putting together their own weekly online shows. Several of the people that are on this call, Dawn has already started along with Trish every Thursday morning. They do self-love. And a reminder that Love Coach Academy is doing these online webinars that are also Facebook Lives every day at 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time and 6 o'clock in the evening Pacific time. And then we've got 2 extra shows on Friday nights at 7:30, Scott and Roxy Straight Talk, which last night's was really interesting. If you get a chance, watch it. And then, of course, tonight is their kind of big flagship show, Saturday Night Live for the Global Peace Tribe. And tonight we've got great guests. We've got Carolyn Mace, we've got Carolyn Casey, we've got John Gray, we've got Danny Sheehan, we've got some really cool musicians. Trish is going to do a wisdom jewel. So that's tonight at 7:30 p.m. You got it. It's a great show. Anyway, I just want to acknowledge a lot of our love coaches that are getting really proactive about creating their own shows. And next week, we're going to have a couple new shows premiering with our love coaches. So really tune into the schedule and watch, support our coaches, be involved. I want to thank Deborah Haviland, who was very active in both yesterday's 6 o'clock show, which was Heidi's Recovery Talk show, and then my show with Roxy. Deborah was active in both, so thank you for that. Mimi, you and your group has a show that's starting this week. Yeah. Anaprabha has a show starting this week with her group. Timothy and Daniel. We're now having a men's group Thursday nights. So it's really cool what's happening. It's really, really cool. So thank you, everybody. Let's all support each other. That's how Cassandra found us. She's been watching our shows. So welcome, Cassandra, to Love Coach Academy. Have a beautiful day, everybody. God's blessings. Oh, and last one, remember, Wednesday night empathy practice group. Everybody should be there. Wednesday night empathy practice group. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.